This is Chapter 5, Lesson 6, the coordinate graph. So, on this page 16, we have an actual physical graph, and you see a lot of different items and blanks over here. So we're just going to go through them and make sure we remember exactly what each one is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here in this left-hand side with the bottommost blank. So in this blank down here, this is pointing to what is called our x-axis. So that's our x-axis. I'm going to go ahead and highlight our x-axis in green. The next blank is pointing to the very center where the axes meet. That's called our origin. The third blank points to what is called the y-axis. And I'm going to highlight the y-axis in pink. You do not have to highlight the x and the y-axis, but if it helps you, it might be a little bit more helpful so you've got a little bit more color on the page. Now remember, these are doodle notes. You can kind of draw in color and however it works for you. Okay. Now on this blank up here, it says the blank corresponds to the number on the x-axis. It's pointing to the 1. So the x-coordinate corresponds to the number on the x-axis. So this tells me how far over, remember because the x is green. I want to make sure it's green. The x is green, so it tells me how far over on the x-axis I need to go. And then over here it says the blank corresponds to the number on the y-axis. Well, if this one coordinated to the x-coordinate, this one's going to be the y-coordinate. I'm sorry, the boxes are really small. Okay. So that's going to tell me how far up and down I need to go. Now on this box over here, it's pointing towards the 1, which is the x-coordinate. And then the second one is pointing towards the whole, which is the ordered pair. Okay, so the ordered pair consists of 1, 2. That's actually the pair. Okay, and then the last one is pointing to the 2, which is our y-coordinate. Okay. You can also see that each of the quadrants is labeled. So I have quadrant 1, where both the x and the y are positive. Quadrant 2, where the x is negative and the y is positive. Quadrant 3, where both x and y are negative. And quadrant 4, where the x is positive and the y is negative. Now at the bottom, it says maps have grids to locate cities. The blank blank is a type of grid that is formed when 2 number lines intersect at their 0 points. So on those first 2 blanks, you're going to write coordinate plane. And this is not a plane like you fly in, but it's actually a specifically designed math term. So maps have grids to locate cities. The coordinate plane is a type of grid that is formed when 2 number lines intersect at their 0 points. The number lines separate the coordinate plane into 4 regions called blank, which is quadrants. And finally, and blank blank is a pair of numbers such as 1, 2 used to locate or graph points on the coordinate plane. In those 2 blanks, you're going to write ordered pair. Okay, so we can also identify points in ordered pairs. So a coordinate plane is formed when the x-axis and the y-axis intersect at their 0 points. The axes separate the coordinate plane into 4 regions called quadrants. Okay. You can use the location on the plane or use the x-coordinate and y-coordinate to identify the quadrant in which a point is located. So let's take a look at some examples. So one says, identify the ordered pair that names point C, then identify the quadrant in which it's located. So the first thing I want to do is look at my graph and figure out where C is. Well, here's C right here. Okay, so then I want to figure out what the x-coordinate is. So I start at 0, and I go over until I get to my point, which is 1.5, and then I go up, and that's at 1. So I went over 1.5, and I went up 1. So step 1 is to go over to where my x-coordinate is, that's my x, and then up or down to where my y-coordinate is. So I have 1.5 and 1. This one's in quadrant 1. So point C is in quadrant 1. Both coordinates are positive, so that's why I also know it's in quadrant 1. Number 2 says identify the point located at -1.5, -1, then identify the quadrant in which it is located. So I can look back at my graph. It said -1.5. So I go -1.5, which is right there, and then down -1. So the point is B, and this is located in quadrant 3. Because both points are negative, I know it's in quadrant 3. So it's point B, and both coordinates are negative, so point B is in quadrant 3. Okay. We can also deal with reflection on the coordinate plane. You can use what you know about number lines and opposites to compare locations on the coordinate plane. Consider the number line and coordinate plane below. The number line shows that -4 and 4 are opposites, right? The coordinate plane shows that the points -4, 0 and 4, 0 are the same distance from the y-axis in opposite directions. So here's -4, 0, and here's +4, 0. So they are reflected across the y-axis. Notice that the y-coordinates did not change and that the x-coordinates are opposites. So example 3 says name the ordered pair that is a reflection of -3, 2 across the x-axis. So this is where I start, -3, 2, and this is my x-axis, so I'm reflecting across, so I get -3, -2. To reflect across the x-axis, I keep the same x-coordinate, so my x-coordinate stays the same, -3, and I take the opposite of the y-coordinate. So the opposite of 2 is -2. So -3, 2 reflected across the x-axis is located at -3, -2. Okay. 4, Kendall is building a square fence. She places the fence post at the locations indicated on the grid. What is the location of the point of the post that reflects -4, 4 across the y-axis? Okay, so here's my point. Right, I'm going to go back up to this grid right here. -4, 4. So there's my point at -4, 4. Okay, and I'm reflecting across the y-axis. This is the y. okay? So in order to do this, so I'm going this way, right? My x is my opposite now, and my y coordinate stays the same. So to reflect across the y-axis, I keep the same y coordinate. And the opposite x coordinate. So it's the opposite. Opposite of -4 is 4. So my coordinate, so -4, 4 reflected across the y-axis is 4, 4. All right, so there are a couple of try-it problems. I want you to go ahead, pause the video, and when we are done, we will go over the answers together. All right, so now that you've had a chance to try out the try-it problems, let's go over the answers together. So letter A says, refer to example 1, identify the ordered pair that names point A, then identify the quadrant in which it is located. So we're going to go back to example 1. Okay, so here's my example number 1. And it said point A. Here's point A. So I'm going over -1 and up to 1.5. Okay. So for letter A, I went over -1 and up 1.5. Okay, so that's the first part. And then I have to figure out which quadrant it is. Well, I went over negative first, so that's going to be quadrant 2. Okay. Letter B says refer to example 1. Identify the point located on 1, -2. Then identify the quadrant in which it is located. So back to example 1. Told me 1. So go over to 1, which is right here. Then down to -2, which is point E. And E is located in 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4th quadrant. So letter B is point E, and it's in quadrant 4. Okay. Letter C says name the ordered pair that is a reflection of the point 1, -4 across the x-axis. Okay. So this means my x stays the same because I'm reflecting across the x. So that's 1. And my -4 is the opposite. My y coordinate's the opposite. So the opposite of -4 is 4. So my coordinate is 1, 4. Letter D says name the ordered pair that is a reflection of the point -2, 5 across the x-axis. Okay, so again, x-axis, my x stays the same, my y changes, it's the opposite. So I get -2, -5. Letter E says name the ordered pair that is a reflection of the point -3, -1 across the x-axis. So again, I have x-axis, so that means my x stays the same, and my y is the opposite. So I have -3, 1. Letter F says name the ordered pair that is a reflection of the point -3, -1 across the y-axis. So now my x-axis, my x value changes, it's the opposite, and my y value stays the same. So I get 3, -1. Okay. Letter G says name the ordered pair that is a reflection of the point 1, -4 across the y-axis. So y-axis, my y value changes, my y value stays the same, and my x value changes. So 1 becomes -1, and -4 stays the same. Letter H, name the ordered pair that is a reflection of the point -2, 5 across the y-axis. Okay, so I go y-axis first, so y stays the same, x changes. So -2 becomes 2, and my y value stays the same. So I get 2, 5. Okay. Letter I says Kendall placed a fence post at -4, -4. What is the location of the post that reflects -4, -4 across the y-axis? So again, y-axis, my y-coordinate stays the same. My x-coordinate is the opposite, so the opposite of -4 is 4, and my y value stays the same. And that is the end of lesson 6.